Hey, love bugs. It is episode 3 of Seen with Serena Kumara, a podcast all about coming back to ourselves, the unlearning, the remembering, and the returning to what has always been true about who we are and what we deserve. And today I have thoughts, and I want to get yours too. It's about the concept of a personal rebrand. So I have seen a lot of content around this on social media. Disappear for 60 days and return a new person, or like, what would the version of you that has everything she wants, how would she move? And let's level up. And I'm not mad at it, right? I feel like it has its place for sure. And I also think it's effective. Where it gets funny for me is that I think it comes across as the solution to your dissatisfaction or your misalignment. And I think it leaves a big hole that healing is supposed to fill. And so I feel like in conjunction with real healing work, it is a powerful thing. But when we look at it as a standalone, I think we can find ourselves really disappointed by the answers. And so I want to talk about how, in my opinion, to use the personal rebrand type process in conjunction with healing in like a way that I think is effective and healthy, and maybe some pitfalls to avoid, to recognize like maybe I'm using this as avoidance. And I really want to talk about why we go towards a personal rebrand versus healing in the first place. I think it's really interesting, and I think it can be important for us to know why we do it. Let's get into it. What I'm talking about when I say rebrand is, sometimes I hear it referred to as just like the level up. Sometimes I've heard it. People use quantum leap interchangeably sometimes. But what I'm talking about is when somebody recognizes that something about the way that they are showing up and living doesn't match what they want. And so they start making shifts, both externally and some internally, to kind of align with where they want to be. So the person who has what I want, how does she dress? How does she speak? How does she think of herself? How does she speak to herself? That sort of thing. What behavior, habits, or even mindset does she have? That's what I'm talking about. So essentially, it's moving in alignment with where you want to be, and the idea that things will start moving to meet you there. And I actually do believe it happens. I do believe that once you start moving, all the energy starts supporting you. The only issue I'm having is that when you don't understand the why behind, essentially why those habits didn't come second nature to you to begin with, or why you have to work so hard to change your mindset, you treat the symptom and not the root, and that can become really exhausting. We shift for a few reasons. The first one we've kind of discussed in my year of whatever I want. It's that general dissatisfaction. I'm just not feeling my life right now. Something about it is misaligned. Let me take a look at my habits and how I'm living and how that aligns with what I want. Another one is just internal pressures. That's not the same as feeling just generally dissatisfied. It's sort of like feeling like you are ready to level up and move to the next thing, but you don't know where you're going. I've experienced a lot of that in that in between time where it's like, well, let me push forward, well, let me do this little rebrand. Maybe that'll revamp things. And it's really just out of the need to feel like I'm moving, even though I don't know where I want to go. Another one is feeling like we're misunderstood. Oh, they're misunderstanding who I am. What is it? Is it my appearance? Is it the way I'm carrying myself? What is it that's making people not treat me how I want to be treated? Okay, well, let me shift something. Rebrand time. Or even comparison. Sometimes it's jealousy or feeling like you're behind, but sometimes it's also feeling like one of your peers was able to accomplish something that you never even considered being a possibility. And now it's like, oh no, wait a minute. I see myself like this as well. Let me step into that new kind of energy. And another reason is grief. A lot of us don't identify as being in grief, but it can be grieving of an old identity, grieving about the fact that you have not had a full identity outside of a role. So sometimes I see that in my clients who are new empty nesters. They may find themselves recognizing that for the last 20 some odd years, they have not had an identity outside of like mother. And so now there's a grief about that realization, and it can trigger this whole, well, let me create an identity now, rebrand. And of course, that comes with a side of burnout. I think that all works together. And again, these are all very valid reasons to say, I need to do something different. There are several reasons why we move towards a rebrand as opposed to another form of healing. We're going to get into the deeper reasons a little bit later, but we can start off with the fact that sometimes it's an external thing that triggers the idea that something is misaligned. So it could be you're up for a promotion and you feel like you got it in the bag, and then you recognize the reason why you didn't get it is because whoever the powers that be don't see you a certain way. Well, let me make these changes because I can see why they don't see me like this. I think I don't see me like that as well. Let me make these changes that are aligned with that position, right? Another reason is that self-help culture encourages us to do it. So we talk about your thoughts become things. And like, if you want to have different, be different, change your habits, change your thoughts, change your energy, that'll fix it. You have everything in control, right? So of course people can reach for that because it can make you feel powerful. Like, these are some things that I can do to make me feel more in control. And honestly, that's another reason, is because that feels like the most accessible shift. I recognize that this action tends to get this result. And so because I want results, I'm going to take these actions. The gratification can be a lot quicker than the ugly parts of healing work. And sometimes we need a motivation. And I get it. I don't know where to start with my healing. What I can do is change my morning routine, right? Like, what I can do is adjust the way that I speak. What I can do is add an affirmation practice. Super helpful. And what is also true is that external action generally gets external results. And that's what we want. And so, of course, if I don't know where to start with this other kind of healing work, if I'm not sure what the root cause of the problem is, I just know that this is a problem and I want to fix said problem, that's what I'm going to do. And I want to say that while external changes generally get external results, gaining access is not the same as internal freedom. And so, a part of the getting what you want, the life experience that you want, is being able to enjoy it. So I'm at a place where I'm manifesting the experience of like what it feels like, what it looks like, what it sounds like. And you don't necessarily always get the what it feels like at its fullest when you are not or haven't done the healing work. And so that's why we're talking about this today. So let's talk about when the rebrand approach is helpful versus when it's really just avoidance. When I think of a rebrand as a jump start, that feels like the best for me. Because, like, sometimes you wake up and you recognize, I'm not happy. I'm out of alignment. I'm not showing up as my best self. You need a little something to give you a boost, to get you sort of a quick result so that you feel like you're winning. You might say, I've outgrown this version of me and I want my life to reflect that. And so that's when we start changing the habits and starting from scratch with the mindset shifts and how we speak to ourselves and things like that, right? I also like the rebrand as an integration or an embodiment. So that's when you have already done a lot of healing work, because sometimes we get stuck in the, oh, I'm healing, as opposed to being like, yeah, but you've healed some stuff. And so you can show up in integration of those lessons and that relief, and you get to enjoy that part. And sometimes we get stuck in that. And so there might be a moment of saying, recognizing, hey, you actually are not that old version anymore. Like, how do we show it? How do we express it outwardly? How do we let the inner work show in our outer world? And I also like it as a bridge or a peek into what's possible. So anybody who has done intentional healing and self-discovery work knows that it can be a process and it can be rough at times. Not all of it is ugly, but sometimes it can be, and you can get really tired. And I've actually gone through phases where I'm like, I actually don't want to be any better. This is where I'm going to be, and I'm fine with her. I'd not like to learn any more lessons. I am good. And I actually feel like that is a place where that rebrand approach, like, all right, we can take a break from digging now. Let's start like doing just the habit things, and like, let's do the changing of our appearance thing if we want to, and like, let's take what we learned and make it something in the middle of something to bridge us to the next point, to pour back into ourselves. Because when we talk about not looking like what you're going through, I don't consider healing necessarily going through something. I think it's a beautiful, uncomfortable process, but it can feel really rough. And so sometimes that rebrand gets you that gratification that you might need for a little bit. Some clues that you're using this rebrand healthily: when you discuss changes with the people you discuss them with, you feel grounded. Even if it's scary, like you feel solid in, this is what we're doing and this is where I am with it. Another thing is with whatever expression it looks like, if it's clothing or just like the way you speak or new habits that you picked up starting to go to the gym, it's not about proving, it's just about expressing where you actually are, and you can tell the difference like in your body. I think that's an indication that the rebrand is a healthy part of your process. And I think also, if you are okay with evolving again later, like you don't think this has to be your final form, I think that comes over time where some of us just recognize, oh, child, it's gonna be, this is great. I know I'm evolving. It happens all the time. I think that is a way that you can feel like, okay, I'm doing this in a healthy way. And I'm just going to say it. I think the rebrand becomes less helpful when you think of it as the medicine as opposed to the container. It's the thinking that the choices you make in terms of like the new outfits, the changing your aesthetic, starting to go to the gym is going to make you feel whole, is going to solve the problem. It may make you feel better, but if we don't address what caused that to be a tough thing for you to do in the first place, you may find yourself just as dissatisfied, but just more satisfied with how you look, but somehow it doesn't hit internally. Some clues that you are viewing the rebrand as the medicine could be that you are really looking for that external validation. I've been on that side as well, where you feel some kind of way if you post a picture of whatever has changed for you, your new identity, and you don't get enough likes, you're feeling some kind of way, or like you feel like you really need those compliments. You look for them. They mean a lot to you. Like that's how you view your confirmation, which I think is normal for it to sometimes feel like, oh, okay. But if you never feel confident, like if you notice that you're not getting compliments and it throws you, that's an indication that there's something else to look at there. And also never taking it anywhere deep, really avoiding the emotional or spiritual approach to anything. When you start to feel low, the new rebrand starts again. So, okay, I'm rebranding and we're moving and I'm feeling good. I'm not feeling good again. All right, let me change it again. I must need to rebrand one more time. Or this isn't right. I focus on this area. Okay, I'm gonna focus on this area and rebrand in this area, and maybe that'll get me what I need. It's an indication that it's not so healthy. And then also really believing that the version of you that you are moving into is not going to experience the hurt that you are experiencing now. You're addressing behavior and mindset, but not necessarily pain. And so a rebrand isn't going to heal that. And so, as I said before, yes, sometimes the rebrand can be an indication that something has really shifted. But a lot of us have been taught that if we present differently, so the curated image, the clearer voice, the new boundaries, the new habits, then that must mean that we've healed, that the changes that we present are an indication of an inner transformation. That's just not true. The same way healing isn't always visible, the rebrand isn't always an indication of an actual integration. We're going to talk about the root of that, because that belief that I believe we collectively hold, whether we realize it or not, that if you look better, then you must be better, did not come out of nowhere. Last week, we discussed the systemic reasons why we struggle with being kind to ourselves. And there are similar reasons as to why we choose a rebrand over healing. And hopefully that'll allow you to give yourself a little more grace, but also give you more permission to make some of the changes. And so this is the part where we talk about the things that we have been navigating that you may not have even thought about or knew existed. Just like last week, there is a common theme regarding these systems. And because there is some overlap, I'm just going to name what the overarching theme is. And then I'll go in more detail as to essentially relevant ways where that shows up in this area. The sub themes is what I'll call them. So the big idea is that we have been conditioned to believe that external transformation results in personal liberation. And that just simply is not the whole story. External transformation on its own is not guaranteed to do anything for your internal world at all. Full stop. All right, so let's talk about some of the ways where that core message is reinforced. Number one is self-help culture. Modern self-help culture is about self-correction and not self-connection. So when you are talking about self-help, typically it's not, well, what do you need? Let's sit with yourself. This is 100 Habits of Millionaires. This is the morning routine of a successful person. This is how you think in order to get what you. And I'm not saying that those are innately bad, but what I am saying, that self-help culture was absolutely built inside of capitalism and individualism. And so if you listen to last week's episode on radical self-kindness, then you would understand that the themes about productivity and how worth is determined and what is valuable in terms of production. The modern self-help world just echoes those sorts of themes because it's built within that system. And so when you're looking for self-help, you're typically in kind of a vulnerable space. You're looking to shift something to change it. And so the messaging you get is you're doing it wrong. Here's how to do it better. That doesn't leave very much room for you to look at why your approach is that. And if that even is the correct approach for you. And it is built for a very specific kind of person. I bet you can guess who. It's based on those standards and it's based on those values. And so people don't realize when you go into self-help and you're moving into self-improvement, what you're being called to do, what you're being encouraged to do is not necessarily even your version of improved because you don't know it's based on one very rigid standard of improvement and it doesn't fit everybody. And we're going to talk about that capitalism again. Capitalism rewards the aesthetic of success. So that means you don't actually have to be okay. It just wants you to look okay. And what okayness looks like is very narrow and rigid. Even if we're looking at, the ways that we make money, things like social media, the way that you monetize your visibility is through confidence and looking like you have it all together, making sure that people can see you as aspirational or inspirational. The content around the clean aesthetic, which is like, that's a very specific kind of aesthetic, right? That gets to be perceived as clean. Does that mean that everything else is dirty? People showing their morning routines. They're like so many steps. And that's not shade. My morning routine is full of steps. It's not shade. But what I'm saying is that is what we are drawn to. So that becomes the standard of what a successful person looks like because that's what we see so much. And so because image is currency, of course, that will be one of the first things that we move towards when we're trying to elevate our lives. And so because healing can be so ugly and non-glamorous and uncomfortable, what we can reach towards is at least looking like things are together even while they're not. Fake it before you make it. And also because healing can actually be slow. Either while you are healing or while you're avoiding healing, you're going to be in performance mode because that's what capitalism rewards, is the appearance of things. And doing what you have to do sometimes. I live in the real world, so it's no shade to that. The problem comes in when you never get a chance to get off the stage. You're consistently performing, and always performing can be exhausting and depleting and just not good for us overall. And even outside of capitalism, like within our family units and like our internal world, our interpersonal relationships, we have been taught to prioritize perception over actual experience. So it's about like, you don't want to wear how you're feeling on your face, and you don't, you kind of keep what's going on in the house in the house and you present a certain way and you like always make sure that your appearance is a certain way and you behave in a very specific manner. The way you're supposed to behave is like this, and it doesn't matter how you feel, what's really true, fix your face, right? And then that's reinforced when we go to school and eventually when we go to work. And so what we internalize is when something feels wrong internally, or we get a feeling like we're starting to show it, we don't move into curiosity. We move into fixing it. Let me snap back in place. We move towards adjustment because we have learned that if I shift how I show up, then maybe I will shift how I feel. And let me say that there is absolutely temporary truth in that. When it comes to moods, like sometimes, like, let me get my head in the game. I've had to do it and it has helped and it has really shifted my mood. But a mood is not the same thing as a wound. And so unless that is addressed, the shifting that you're doing will always shift right back. And this last one is that real healing can feel inaccessible. And that's not just about money. While that's very true, sometimes there is a perception or reality that things like therapy or more traditional healing services are expensive. And some people are not aware of the resources that are available to them. So that's very true. But what is also true is outside of money, healing becomes inaccessible when it's not normalized, when it's not modeled, and it's not discussed in a way that feels real or relatable to us. So you may not even realize what kind of support or healing exists, right? I am an intuitive healer and I have done this work since 2018. And every day I'm finding out some new modality that exists, right? But that's somebody who is tapped into that world and connected. The average person who might need hypnosis or who might need someone who is intuitive to see directly to the wound and speak to it doesn't necessarily know that that exists, or they have an idea that something might, but they don't know where to get it. That is that inaccessibility I'm talking about. The version of healing that you've seen may seem very surface level and it didn't really work. And so now you're like, ugh. Or there might have been a way that healing has been presented as fixing. And if it's about fixing yourself, who wants to even do that? That sounds hard. It doesn't sound sexy and it sounds uncomfortable and I don't want to do it. And so then, of course, you are going to move towards a rebrand because that is what all the girls are doing. That is something that is very external and it's accessible and it's more straightforward to do, right? But I'm just going to ask you, who benefits from you doing the thing that makes you more productive rather than taking a step back and doing your healing work? Because it ain't you. So let's talk about what can happen if we just allow ourselves to make rebranding our entire transformation. One thing that can happen is that we can just get like extremely exhausted because you're on all the time. It's like a constant becoming because you have to consciously move how you believe the version of you that you want to be, who has what you want to have, moves. And if it's not an authentic integration of actual healing work to where your inner world has caught up, you're back on that stage that we talked about, that constant performance. And that state of constantly being in the space of becoming, but not in that beautiful blossoming kind of way that just is like natural unfolding and blooming. The way I'm seeing it is like ripping yourself out of plastic, like how kids like very roughly unpack presents or open up their toys that they are in that plastic wrap. That's how I'm seeing that rebranding, forced transformation sort of thing, where it's like it's not gentle, it's just willy-nilly ripping it off in a way that is really not sustainable, which is what can cause even more burnout. And so whereas before you felt like your present self didn't match what your future self had or how they showed up, now it's like your inner self doesn't match with your outer self. And that push and pull is draining. And so you can look healed but not feel safe. You can look fulfilled but not be happy. You can have all the habits and you could have made all the external changes and you can actually have gotten the external results that you wanted, but it can feel gross. still unsettled, and you can still question, it can still feel like it could fall through the cracks every day. It can be like you walked through a doorway without addressing the stories and the systems and the wounds. So you sort of end up where you started because what's underneath wasn't addressed. This is not about calling you fake or saying that like you just pretended. What you made was a real step. It's just that healing isn't about curating the perfect version of yourself. It's about creating the safety to exist as you already are. So if you've been listening to this and you recognize that your rebrand was something beautifully curated, but also was a response to a deeper pain, and you're thinking, okay, well, what do I do with this information? I do want to offer you somewhere to begin. I want to be sure to tell you not to feel like you're behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Don't feel like you've been doing anything wrong. What you did served a purpose. It's time to begin something new. Here's one place you can start. I would start to ask, where have I been performing? What part of the way I'm showing up feels inauthentic? And then another question would be, what part of myself am I trying to prove or protect? Now, I'm an automatic writing kind of girl. Those can feel like heavy questions that require a lot of self awareness. But what I do find can happen is if you give yourself the space to and you just start writing, awarenesses that you don't consciously know you have can and will come up. And you will learn something about yourself in that moment. Again, these are not in any particular order. They're not a checklist. They're just ideas for you to sit with and move towards what resonates. I would also encourage you to move with curiosity and not correction. Try really hard not to judge yourself because that can actually slow the process when you make judgments about things. And it's easier said than done. No judgment here. Notice that I said it can either slow or delay the process. I didn't say it will stop it, right? But allow yourself the space to just be curious. Journal without writing as if someone else is going to read it, cleaning it up for the page because you don't like what it looks like on paper. You can also just voice memo your raw thoughts if you feel so inclined to write things down in a way that's very polished. Maybe speaking into a voice note will be helpful. That works for me. And once you do it, once you've written or you've spoken, you can ask yourself, is there anything I left out that I'm afraid that other people or I will see if I stop editing? And there's something right there. Find or create a space where your healing can be messy. Now, listen, whatever you identify in your journaling or in your voice memos, if you can pick up a theme or what comes to you, because you have everything inside of you, you will not fail yourself. I would Google support groups for whatever you think the theme is, therapists for whatever you think the theme is, workbook or journaling or meditation or healers for this area, right? Another thing that you can absolutely do to find resources is if something is not coming up or you're not sure how to put it, you can go to ChatGPT or any other AI and say, I think I'm looking for this thing. Can you tell me another way to say it or a more widely recognized way to say it? Or you can even ask, I feel like I'm having an issue with this based on, being a healing expert, a holistic expert, or mental health expert. Um, can you give me some suggestions of the directions that I should look in? I am not telling you to use ChatGPT as a therapist. I am telling you to use AI as a resource support so you can continue your research. And something that I think is super necessary is to redefine what progress means to you. If everything in that definition for you has to do with what it looks like on the outside, please rethink that. Sometimes progress means allowing yourself to cry in the shower instead of shutting down. Sometimes progress is being honest about whether you're not okay, even if it's not to anybody else, it's just to yourself, right? Sometimes progress has nothing to do with what it looks like. Sometimes progress looks exactly the same on the outside. And that is a necessary change to make if you want real transformation that is internal, that absolutely will support external change and maintaining it. And I just want to say this because I'm not sure if I said this somewhere else in the episode, but I really want to say it can be very tempting to take a look at this and recognize that you've been rebranding, but you really need healing and feel like you've done something wrong and pick on yourself. And I really would discourage that. I would actually ask you to not do that. I also would add, it can sound strange for me to say that the mindset stuff is not healing, because I think people would relate it because it is sort of rewiring your brain. And I will say that there is absolutely value in mindset work and changing the way that you speak to yourself, for sure. It just is not a substitute for the excavation piece of healing, the looking at it and facing your stuff as opposed to trying to bypass it. It all works together. So please don't think I'm saying to not be mindful, to just ignore the way you speak to yourself, or the way you treat yourself. I am saying it's not one or the other. They work hand in hand, because the truth of the matter is the issue isn't the result of a mindset or a habit. The mindset and the habit are the result of something else. So a belief, a trauma, a system, conditioning, etc. And we do ourselves a disservice and we block our full healing when we don't acknowledge it and move accordingly. So it's time for this week's affirmation. It comes from Unapologetic Affirmations, a collection of 100 plus reminders of who we are and what we deserve, available on Amazon. And this week we have 2. I move through every challenge with ease. Life happens. I have everything I need to navigate any circumstance, and I am a magnet for divine love. Always and always. Listen, I love you. Thank you for joining me and trusting me. If you don't already, please like, share, and subscribe. Share with a friend that you think needs it, and I'll see you next week.